Hi, everyone. It's Friday, September 26th, and I'm U.S. Attorney Janine Ferris-Pirro. Keeping D.C. safe and beautiful is the #1 priority here. And here's your weekly case update. Sentences of note. A 33-year-old by the name of Ricky Watkins was sentenced to 37 months in prison for carrying a loaded semi-automatic pistol, which fell from his body as he was running from the police. Officers had initially stopped him for operating a dirt bike in a public space. He was prohibited from possessing a firearm because he had previous firearms and child cruelty convictions. A 65-year-old, Levita Ferrer, was sentenced to 12 months and 1 day in prison for embezzling more than $650,000 from the U.S. State Department during a 2-year period. The woman was a budget analyst at the State Department and used her signature authority with the agency's checking account to write checks to herself and use the money for her gambling addiction. On the date of sentencing, the judge told her to stay away from casinos. And of course, on that very same day that she was sentenced, she went directly to a casino. 57-year-old Cayenne Garner was sentenced to 87 months in prison for distribution of child pornography. Cayenne Garner distributed these videos depicting prepubescent boys engaged in sexually explicit conduct. Charges and arrests. A 17-year-old high school student was arrested and charged as an adult in the criminal court, being prosecuted by my office for shooting and armed robbery of an off-duty D.C. firefighter. The teen approached the off-duty firefighter, who was walking home from a friend's house, and demanded his phone and belongings. When the firefighter handed over everything in his hands, the suspect then ordered the victim to unlock his phone and pointed a gun at his chest. At that point, the victim grabbed the barrel of the gun, and he ended up being shot in the chest. A 36-year-old, Ricardo Botts, was arrested and charged with second-degree murder for his own mother's death. The man attacked his 66-year-old mother in their shared home by stabbing her repeatedly in the face and head. He fled the home shortly after the brutal killing, but he was captured by the Capital Area Regional Task Force in Chantilly, Virginia. A 38-year-old man was arrested and charged with first-degree murder of 28-year-old Daquan Johnson. The defendant is charged with a hate crime enhancement to the underlying murder charge after harassing and hurling slurs and shooting the transgendered victim multiple times throughout the body. And 22-year-old Nizer Miles was arraigned in Superior Court for multiple assaults on his former girlfriend, severely injuring her. Following the initial argument, the defendant punched the victim in the face, but several hours later, he became angry again and took her cell phone. He then punched her in the mouth so severely that she had to have a wire inserted in her mouth to hold her teeth in place. Pleas and convictions. 2 19-year-old men pleaded guilty to an armed carjacking, and one of them pleaded guilty to a separate shooting that was committed on the very same day in March. One of the men fired approximately 30 rounds at a victim as the victim walked toward a bus stop, and those rounds ended up hitting his house and car. Later that day, both men carjacked yet another victim at gunpoint. When they and their 2 accomplices were caught after fleeing a traffic stop, police recovered 2 illegal firearms, one of which had an automatic conversion switch. A 56-year-old man and a 25-year-old woman pleaded guilty to armed carjacking. The 56-year-old man approached the victim as she was walking out of a restaurant. He displayed a pistol and told her, "Give me those effing keys or I'm going to bust your head." The carjackers took the victim's keys, phone, and wallet and then demanded the PIN number to her debit card. They then put the victim in the car and drove her to Maryland, where she withdrew $500 from an ATM before driving her back to the victim, and then they fled on foot. A 24-year-old man was convicted of a federal firearms offense, along with unlawful possession with intent to distribute cocaine and oxycodone. When the man was arrested, officers recovered $1,600 in cash and a key fob to a rented Dodge Charger. When the rental car was searched, officers found a firearm with an extended magazine, a plastic bag containing 50 grams of crack cocaine, and 177 oxycodone pills. And 41-year-old Lalake Meseretu was found guilty by a federal jury of conspiracy, bribery, and wire fraud. He's a former vendor who conspired with two D.C. public school officials to steer lucrative business contracts to the company he owned. In the scheme, he agreed to defraud the D.C. public schools by delivering a significantly lesser number of supplies to the school system in return for kickbacks. And in other developments, my office has reached a civil settlement with 6 nonprofit organizations who violated the False Claims Act. These organizations applied for and received loans under the Paycheck Protection Program. This program was established in March of 2020 to provide emergency financial support to Americans suffering from economic hardship due to the COVID-19 pandemic. These organizations have agreed to pay settlements ranging from $7,000 to $1.9 million as a resolution of their crimes. And the Justice Department filed a civil forfeiture complaint against a 2020 Subaru Forester SUV, which belonged to a convicted sex offender. The 33-year-old man lived in New York and drove from Maryland to the district to an expected or hoped-for encounter with a minor. He was sentenced in May to 87 months in prison. And as a follow-up, since the surge began, there have been 3,339 arrests and 311 guns removed from the street. Some of these individuals are some of the worst individuals in the district, where there has been an attempt by President Trump to make sure that he gives us sufficient federal resources so that we can identify the drivers of violence in the district and remove them from our communities. And that is what the president promised and what he's doing. And of course, every day we confront the pain and the trauma inflicted on victims by criminals. My responsibility and my office's responsibility is to stand up for you. We will stop at nothing to expose wrongdoers, prove their crimes in court, and finally deliver justice to victims.